People think, okay, oh, we have a Nobel Prize winner every year, so you could do
Right.
research for 1 year and then,
Right.
get the prize the next one.
Right.
That's not how it goes, though.
Yeah, that's not how it goes. I wasn't sick of doing research, and I didn't dislike it, and I still sort of wish I could do both. If you haven't really planned how you're going to do that, you can't.
Don't
So
tell them that. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Scientist Podcast. Today's interview, or today's episode, is the second episode from the interviews I did in Kyushu University. This was part of a meeting or a forum called the SciComm Forum, in which scientists from all over Japan and outside of Japan gather and find the different ways and discuss what are the best ways to communicate science in the universities and to the public. Last episode was with Dr. Andrew, and I hope you watched that episode because it's a very valuable episode, especially for someone who's interested in doing science, for example, or starting their YouTube about science, or generally just starting YouTube, because the tips that Andrew gave are applicable anywhere. Today's episode, however, is with Adam, as I'm sure you've seen. Adam is a neuroscientist who moved from research and decided to go with science communication. And in today's episode, he talks about the different things, the different feelings, the different ideas you go through as a scientist, as a researcher, and what would drive you to go into a different career. For example, he decided to move into science communication. And even though in the beginning, when I asked him about, are there things that you learn through your PhD or through your research and that help you translate these skills into other careers? In the beginning, he said, not really sure. But then I would suggest that you would watch this episode, grab a cup of coffee or whatever you want, and listen to what he has to say, because these are really valuable questions that you would ask yourself, whether you're in science, in research, or in another field, because you just have to reevaluate your position always. And I hope you take the time to listen to today's podcast and see for yourself what are the steps that you might want to consider if you're going in one career path, and when do you switch into another one. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you like and subscribe to the channel, because many of you are not yet subscribed to the channel. So subscribe, please. And let's get to the episode. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi.
Hi, Adam. It's been basically a year since we met, until yesterday, at least, right? But yeah, thank you for agreeing to do the podcast.
Sure.
We're on the Scientist Podcast, back again. So can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Adam Phillips, from Chicago, now in Japan, for quite some time.
That is quite some time.
Maybe 16 years or something like that. But I do go back to visit the U.S. When I can.
Nice.
I guess professionally, I used to be a researcher. I have a PhD in neurophysiology, and from Northwestern University, and I did a couple postdocs here in Japan, and then I switched to doing some science communication, science writing, at Riken, in outside of Tokyo.
Nice. So, what were the skills? I mean, obviously, like you know the writing part, but the things that you learned during your PhD that you found them like translating one-on-one in your science communication career.
I'm not really sure there are any.
Don't
So-
tell them that.
Well, I mean, I guess that when you do when you're getting your PhD, you're very focused on your field and your specific topic of your research within your field, and you do have to explain that to other people who are, different labs, or even people in your same lab doing different projects. So at every level, or I should say, with every time group of people you're explaining your stuff to, you have to have a different level of detail and a different level of you can assume a different level of background knowledge that you don't have to explain, or you can't assume that. So, and of course, explaining stuff to my family, who none of them are into, well, my sister's a biology professor, but aside from her, nobody else, is can really, not that they can't understand, but they don't have a background in biology or those hard science fields. So you have to be able to explain what you're doing to unless you don't care if people don't know what you're doing. But I did, so I learned how to do some of that.
How to communicate your ideas, basically,
Yeah,
right?
how to communicate the ideas. So I guess there's two parts, right? It's
Yeah.
like how to explain the ideas is one part, but then actually which ideas you choose to explain is also important, because you're not going to want to get into like so much detail with somebody who doesn't know that, like, for example, that a neuron is a type of cell, right?
Yeah.
So if there's somebody, and just not because they're ignorant or stupid, just because maybe they've never thought about it, or they don't, they didn't really,
It's not their field of
learn.
interest
Yeah,
or
they
something.
just don't know that kind of thing. So so you're not going to start explaining like some, big molecular cell, organelles, or like, the, how the electrical impulses are going down a neuron because of some channel, that's protein made out of whatever, and it's like, and all this stuff,
Yeah.
and they don't know,
What
they don't
a
know what you're
neuron
talking
is.
about, and it won't mean anything. So you
Yeah.
really, so choosing what you're gonna talk about and then how you're gonna talk about it, I guess, are
I
a little
think-
bit separate in my
So
mind.
they say, like in speeches, like you always have to know your audience.
Yeah.
So this is why you have to customize what you're
Yeah,
saying.
you have
It's
to
a very
know your
similar idea to
audience.
this, right?
Yeah, and it's like when you're writing, when you're writing, you're, you can write whatever you want and then choose which audience to give it to, or you can, have an audience in your mind when you start writing, and then, you can write the same. I mean, you can explain the same thing in different ways to at different levels in your writing, but it's a little different from doing a presentation. And I mean, I do teach science presentation giving. That is not English, but you can edit that out, right? Fix that, please. But yeah, at Tamagawa University, which is, I did one postdoc there, and then after I went back to Riken, they asked me to teach science presentation to their master's students.
I see.
And so I do that once a year. And part of what I try to tell them is that, unlike a paper where somebody can, or a press release or something, people can read it over and over again, as many times as they want. But when you're giving a presentation, there's no rewind.
That's your one shot to
Yeah,
get
and
next,
so like
right?
you can't structure a presentation with the same way you write a paper. I mean, in a little bit, and these are science presentations, so like at conferences or whatever, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, so communication is not just like, I'm a smart guy, I know this stuff, I can explain it. You have to really, it's an art, and it's like teaching. I mean, it's basic. Yeah, I mean, teaching is like not something you can just do just because you know stuff.
And this is the reason, like, there are good teachers and bad teachers.
Yes.
Teachers that
Yeah.
remain in your head, like after you graduate, and you remember them for the rest of your life as being awesome.
Yeah.
And there are teachers that you just want to forget about, you know?
or that you did forget about.
Or those you already did forget
Yeah,
about.
but of course the really bad
Yeah.
ones you remember for
Yeah.
the opposite reason.
True. Yeah. So just going back a little bit, like career-wise, so talking about career-wise, I think people who listen to this podcast are either doing their PhDs or might be during a postdoc looking for the next step. Uh, First of all, do you see the academic pyramid as a sustainable way of continuing, careers for, academics? And number two, what what's the point that you were like, you said you did two postdocs, right? You were like, okay, this is not for me. I would like to do something else.
Okay, so I'll answer the second part first
Okay.
because I think I can answer it because it's my own thoughts.
Yeah.
Honestly, there were a bunch of different things happening at the same time, which sort of made me switch to doing this stuff. And it wasn't really that I wasn't sick of doing research, and I didn't dislike it, and I still sort of wish I could do both, you know.
Yeah.
But for me at the time, I was living in Japan, and I had been here for, you know, at that time 6 years maybe, and it was my second postdoc, and you have in your mind you're gonna be a PI or a professor, and then when you start actually trying, if you haven't really planned how you're gonna do that, you can't. I mean, so like in my case, if I wanted to go back to the US and do this sort of thing, typically they really want you to have experience writing grants for NIH or, whatever,
Yeah.
wherever you want to get your grant from, but it's usually NIH. And I didn't have that because I'd been here,
Yeah.
doing my work here, and they didn't really require grant writing at Riken where I was a postdoc or at Tamagawa. So realistically, I'd sort of like, assessed my situation and was like, it's going to be really hard to do that. And then also, I wanted to stay in Japan at that point. I wasn't ready to go back to the U.S. And so, and obviously I'm still not, right? But I mean, at that time it was still like sort of my plan. But then, yeah, if I stay longer doing more in Japan, that it gets more difficult to go back to the U.S.
Yeah.
And then, of course, becoming a PI and having a permanent job in Japan is not, like, it just doesn't happen. There's very few opportunities for that.
Yeah.
It does happen, but like,
Very, very rarely.
there's very,
Yeah.
very few chances where you get,
Yeah.
a tenured position, right? It used to be like they hire you, for like 3 years or something, and then you might get another 3-year contract, something
Yeah,
like that. And
exactly.
so at that time when I was switching and I liked writing, I always liked writing, and I know I'm good at it, and I was doing editing like on the side, like freelance, and so like I know, it's like I just sort of decide, okay, I can, get into science communication. I like it. Uh, it's like you sort of feel you're not giving up, but it's a path that you're no longer on, and maybe you have maybe the same experience. I don't know, but like for me, I love science still, and I like teaching. But now it's like a one-way teaching, right? It's like you're writing press releases, you're doing science community, teaching people about science, but it's not interactive, really, like
Yeah,
the way
you're just
teaching
kind of
is.
just kind of
Yeah,
one way
it's just
kind of,
like you're
yeah.
just you're pushing out the information and people can learn from it if they get access to it.
Yeah.
But it's so I try to like think of it that way, as I'm still contributing, in that kind of way to help, science awareness and help people learn, that
To be
sort of
honest,
thing.
like love for science might be the only reason that we're kind of doing this.
Yeah, right.
Because otherwise, you would have chosen a different field and just
Yeah,
moved on.
yeah.
Because I don't know, this, to me at least, in my need to be part of this thing called science, is just like I want to be part of it, and this is why like we're just kind of I keep doing the podcast, or my job is also kind of science communication. So that love for science is actually what is driving me there. I'm sure you said like you do
Yeah.
too, right?
And actually, I sort of would add about my personal experience that, doing science communication and being at Recon, which does, uh, research in really a lot of different areas. So, and I'm writing about them, and I'm reading the papers that I would never have been reading if I was still doing my, work in my lab on my own, my own research and my own topics. But, now I'm not just doing, neuroscience. I'm reading plant science. I'm reading like chemistry and, like sustainable resource
Isn't
kind
that
of
difficult
thing,
though?
batteries,
It's not difficult,
it,
because you're reading research papers.
yeah.
They're not just, you're basically squeezing the information out of the papers, right? In a way that is understandable to the public.
Hopefully.
I hope you do, right? No, I'm sure you do.
You can check yourselves. Go.
Yeah.
There's a website. You can read stuff.
Actually, I'll link it. I'll take the
Okay.
link from you
That'll
and
be
just
great.
post it in the
That'll be
description.
great.
But yeah, like, was there like a time where you were like, okay, this is not my field. How do I do this? Or it was
The
always
communication
yeah.
stuff. No, I was pretty. Yeah, no, I got it pretty quickly. So, I mean, when I first joined Recon, and so I work in the global communications team of the International Affairs division, which it was called something else when I joined, but it's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
And so the first things that I had to do was, write press releases and learn how to write a press release, right? And it's a different type of writing than writing a paper, but I'm well read, and I have a brain, and it didn't take too long to figure out, what the differences are and how to do it.
Like, but you had to
and-
kind of do a different approach, or it's basically the same for.
No, it's a
mean,
different approach.
right?
I mean, it's a very different approach because you have to write something that, anybody can understand. And especially, and even now, actually, writing the press releases about the brain science is, in some ways, the more difficult. Or at least I need to step back and check it many times to make sure that I'm not assuming knowledge that doesn't exist. Because there's a lot of things that I take sort of for granted, that people know, because it's just it's just
For
in
you,
me.
it's just like, yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
and so you have to like ask people who are you have to ask people to read it who don't know, and say like, does this make sense to you? Is this and they're like, no, what the hell is this? And I'm like, okay, I have to rewrite that and make, and either change the wording or, come up with an example that's gonna explain what it means without explaining what it means, and so
Yeah.
like that kind of yeah, you have to think that way. And it I never thought I couldn't do it, but it's not like I could do it well at the very beginning.
I see.
Yeah.
So there's a bit like of an adjustment curve. We're not gonna say learning curve, but like kind of like you had to kind of tone
Yeah.
down your knowledge a little
Yeah,
bit.
and I mean, I think learning curve is a good way to say.
Way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, like you have, yeah, it takes some time. So, but I was working with people who were giving me the opportunity to figure it out, and who were, reading what I wrote and commenting on it and giving me feedback and saying, yeah, this is too much information, or this is like, find a different way to explain this that's not going to make people bored, like that kind of thing. Because you do have to, writing a press release or trying to engage people into your topic is, it is kind of, you're selling some, you're trying to sell the idea, or like, you want people to become interested, and a lot of it is headlines, making a good headline, and learning a little bit about what is it, like the SEO, or
Search engine
yeah,
optimization.
so like
Yeah.
knowing what, you shouldn't have titles that are too long, or like, like things like that, so that when people see it on social media, or on on a Google search or something, that they're going to want to read it. And I mean, we all hate the clickbait stuff,
Yeah. There's nothing
but
worse than, click on
people
something.
click on it, right?
Yeah, but then the disappointment is like, so if there's a website that does this a lot, I'll probably never click on the link
True,
on that,
true.
right? So
So you have
yeah.
to be, but
You
the
have to kind
concept
of,
is there. Like,
yeah.
we want people to click, and we want people to read. Of course, we don't want to switch, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to do the bait and switch. We just want to do the
Yeah.
bait and then provide good
And
content,
exactly,
right?
that's what
But you
matters.
have to have like some hook. You have to have a way to, get people to come in and be interested.
So I saw recently, I think it was on Twitter, like a comparison between, good content and great content. But the good content would have a great hook, and then the great content would have a bad hook. And then something with a great hook will always get more
Yeah.
like exposure
Yeah.
than great content with a bad hook. So
Yeah.
I think this is what we were
Yeah, so
referring to.
totally. And so like, and I'm not like, perfect at it. We definitely have some duds that don't get any coverage. And part of it is the title, part of it is, maybe it's just not interesting, or whatever. So I mean, like, you can't always be successful. Or I should say, like, our success depends in part by the research, of course.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not like we're making things up and just making things interesting, right? We have to go with what we're given. In our institute is doing, research, and if, we have to decide, okay, this research is going to be interesting to people, let's write about it. Or this research is really good science, it's like great science, and it's important science, but most people don't care. And like, sometimes we want to make them care, so we choose a topic like that, and we write about it, and those are really the most difficult ones.
Yeah.
And I typically, and for me, those are the ones that I do the life sciences, and I think those usually have something about them that people can understand why they're important, kind of quickly. But we also do a lot of like physics research, and like quantum computers, and that kind of
Those
thing,
are a bit difficult
which are
to.
it not only, like, for me, I don't do those press releases because I don't really know enough physics. But they're more difficult because the topics are difficult, but also it's not always readily apparent that there's an immediate benefit, right? And so those are harder to get people interested in. I think people understand that there are people do research. We want to gain knowledge and figure stuff out, and it's not always about having an immediate outcome, right? I think people understand that, like, some things take years, or some discovery in one area leads to some invention in another area
But
years later,
but I think
but they're
it's
not interested in it.
and it's underestimated, like how many years does it take to
Yes.
actually come up. Like people think, okay, oh, we have a Nobel Prize winner every year, so you could do
Right.
research for 1 year and then
Right, 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 right.
get the prize the next one.
Right, right,
That's
right.
not how it goes, though.
Yeah, that's not how it goes. That's not how it goes.
People get Nobel Prize from probably researching for like
For like
20
20,
years
yeah,
or
yeah,
something,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Well, we've answered the first or the second question
Oh
quite
yeah. Well, the first
extensively, right?
question,
No.
the pyramid or the
Yeah.
structure.
Yeah. Is it sustainable, just like in your opinion?
I mean, I honestly I don't know. I think that especially in like a place like Japan where there aren't a lot of there aren't as many universities as there are in the US, and there aren't as many places to do research, and but we want to keep producing people that can do research. And so there really is a bottleneck of, higher positions. And I think a lot of people end up being stuck as a postdoc for more years than they want. And it's not a great way to have a career.
And postdocs are not that lucrative anymore, to be honest. Like benefits as a postdoc are not the same as, like, let's say a full-time employee or a
Yeah,
tenured like
yeah,
position,
yeah.
right?
I mean, where I work, they do have, they have research scientists, which are, I guess, beyond postdoc, but they're maybe not a PI, but they're like long-term like researchers. And I mean, like companies, I think, have that kind of structure
So this is what I'm
sometimes.
saying.
But
Like, if you get employed at a company, like let's say when you're doing postdocs, you're already at that age or at that career stage that you would like something stable. You cannot just live your life with a 1 year contract for foreseeable future. It's a bit
yeah, and then that is another sort of consideration I made when I switched.
right.
So, and yeah, because I didn't want to have to worry about finding another job or doing job searches and all that kind of stuff over and over
And
again.
it's stressful.
Yes,
It's very
it's
stressful.
very
So we
stressful.
can all sit here and talk about how great research is, but when it comes down to actually making a living, in order to do the
Yeah,
research,
and I
it
mean, and
gets
part of the
quite
issue,
stressful.
I mean, I guess, of course, you have to have, if you want to be successful, you need to be a good researcher,
Obviously, yeah.
right? You have to have good ideas, but more importantly, you have to have good results. And yeah, part of I said earlier that I didn't dislike research, but I also definitely was frustrated by some things where, when you have, you can have a really good idea and do a really good experiment and learn that, yeah, you were wrong, or not wrong, but like the interesting hypothesis wasn't true.
Yeah.
Right.
Which
And
is
so,
part of
and it's
research,
part of research, but it's really hard, and especially if it's a negative result, it's really hard to get people to recognize the importance of it. And so most publications are not negative results. They're
yeah.
they're positive results. And so, but you can do something like for 3 years, like a 3-year experiment or something, and then come up with almost nothing. And then it's like, yeah, we learned something important, but it didn't, it's not going to help me
It did not lead to
get
any
another
paper
job,
or
right?
yeah, right. Yeah.
So, so there's that issue. And then just in general, like, I mean, different fields are different, of course, but yeah, what I'm doing now is not something where I spend 3 years doing the same thing. I do one thing and I'm done. See ya. And I never think about that thing again.
Yeah.
That's like, maybe it takes like 2 weeks to do, or like a week to do that project. Okay, finished.
Done.
Go
Yeah.
to the next one. And it's, you're not doing the same thing for like, 3 or 4 years. And that is one of the nice things about not doing research. But yeah, I mean, I do sometimes miss it because,
Honestly,
you like to be the person discovering stuff,
yeah.
or finding stuff
And
out.
it's fun, like, to be honest, like, if you really think of it, it's fun, the techniques you learn, the experiments, the waiting for the results, like, all of that process is very fun if your livelihood did not depend on it.
Right,
you
right.
know?
But so here's one thing you asked earlier,
Yeah.
and I didn't really I wasn't thinking about what I was saying completely, but but kind of like what we were talking about yesterday. So
Yeah.
you asked me, what skill did I have that translates to the communication? And
Yeah.
so this doesn't translate to the communication, but it translates to part of my job, right? So I did have to like design experiments and analyze the data and that sort of thing, right? And I'm kind of doing a little bit of that now because we're trying to, we want to show people that we're doing a good job. So you have to have some metrics to assess or analyze what you're doing and to show like, okay, we're doing a good job this year. Like our press releases are making an impact, or they're not making an impact. So we have to analyze that data. And so I am getting a chance to use some of my data analysis or that kind of thinking in my current job, so that's cool.
Just for people who don't know what a press release is for a research institute.
Okay.
What is a press
That
release?
is a good point. So when researchers are, when they publish something before it comes out, or the day it comes out published, if it's very important or exciting research, we want to, write a short kind of summary of the research, highlighting the main points and maybe providing a couple of quotations from the researchers. And we send that out to the media. There are services that we send them out to, and then like registered journalists and stuff will look at those sites that collect those press releases, and then if they see something that's interesting, then they'll want to write something about it and contact our researchers and ask them some in-depth questions and and write something. So so a good result for us is if maybe we get something on CNN or the New York Times or something like that. We would consider that a really good job.
Well,
Give me a sticker.
okay. Well, thank you very much, Adam.
Yeah.
I'm sure you said you wanted to go back
Yeah,
up,
I just
and
yeah.
yeah, it took a little bit more than 30 minutes.
Okay.
But I think we're still on time.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you very much.
I don't. Oh yeah, that's fine.
Right. Appreciate you.
Yeah.